The rattling of the stage-coach wheels against the dusty trail came to an abrupt halt, jolting Zara Reynolds awake from her light slumber. Through the small window, the orange glow of sunset had been replaced by something more sinister, a blazing crimson hue that danced across the horizon of Rattlesnake Valley. The year was 1875, and Zara had traveled all the way from Boston to the Arizona Territory to start anew as the town's schoolteacher, but fate had other plans for her arrival. Fire! The driver's panicked voice pierced through the evening air. Everyone out, the valley's ablaze. Zara gathered her modest belongings, clutching her leather-bound journal to her chest as she stumbled out of the stagecoach. The heat hit her immediately, a wall of scorching air that made her lungs constrict. What should have been her first glimpse of Rattlesnake Creek's peaceful valley was instead a terrifying vision of nature's fury. The drought-stricken landscape had become a perfect kindling for the flames that now licked up the hillsides, consuming everything in their path. "Miss, you need to get to higher ground." The stagecoach driver pointed frantically toward a ridge to the north. "The fire's spreading from the south and east. Head north, there's a creek up that way," Zara nodded, fighting back tears of fear as she hitched up her skirts and began to run. The other passengers, an elderly couple and a traveling salesman, were already scrambling in the same direction, their silhouettes black against the hellish glow. The wind carried embers overhead like fiery shooting stars, igniting new blazes wherever they landed. Her city boots, wholly inadequate for the terrain, caught on a rock, sending her tumbling to the ground. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to stand, and the precious journal flew from her grasp. Zara looked up to see the flames advancing more quickly than she could have imagined possible, the roar of the fire drowning out even her own desperate cries for help. The smoke thickened around her, stinging her eyes and making each breath more painful than the last. As she crawled toward her fallen journal, a figure emerged from the swirling gray haze, a man atop a powerful buckskin horse, riding straight toward the flames. "Take my hand," he shouted, extending his arm down to her as the horse pranced nervously. Without hesitation, Zara reached up, feeling his strong grip as he hoisted her onto the horse behind him. Her journal lay forgotten on the ground, but survival now consumed her thoughts entirely. "Hold tight," the man commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. He spurred the horse forward, navigating through the maze of flames with the confidence of someone who knew the land intimately. Zara wrapped her arms around the stranger's waist, feeling the rough texture of his leather vest against her cheek as she pressed against his back. He smelled of earth and smoke, and something indefinably wild that spoke of the frontier. The horse galloped north, its powerful muscles straining as it carried them up the steep hillside. The fire seemed determined to cut them off, racing alongside them and occasionally flaring up in their path. Each time, the cowboy would expertly guide his mount around the danger, his body tense but his hands sure on the reins. As they crested a rise, Zara looked back to see the entire valley transformed into a sea of flames. The stagecoach was now a distant burning shell, and she said a silent prayer for the other passengers, hoping they had found their way to safety. "Creek's just ahead," the cowboy called over his shoulder. "We'll be safe once we cross it." The promised water appeared, a shallow but swift-moving stream that cut through the rocky terrain. The horse plunged in without hesitation, the cowboy guiding it to a small clearing on the opposite bank where several other people had already gathered, refugees from the fire like herself. As they dismounted, Zara finally got her first clear look at her rescuer. He stood tall in worn leather boots, his frame lean but powerful. His face, partially obscured by several days' worth of stubble, was handsome in a rugged way, with eyes the color of the summer sky and a strong, determined jaw. His dark blonde hair fell in disheveled waves beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and every inch of him was covered in a fine layer of ash and soot. "Thank you," Zara managed, her voice hoarse from the smoke. "You saved my life." "Ryan Thornton," he replied simply, tipping his hat. "Ranch is about half a mile further up. We should get there before the wind changes." "Zara Reynolds," she offered in return. "I was on my way to Rattlesnake Creek. I'm to be the new school teacher." A flicker of something recognition perhaps passed across his face. "Well, Miss Reynolds, I'm afraid your welcome to our territory has been less than hospitable." But if the town's still standing after this, they'll be mighty glad to have you." Before she could respond, a gust of wind brought a shower of embers raining down on their temporary haven. One landed on Zara's shoulder, instantly burning through the thin fabric of her traveling dress. She cried out in pain, frantically trying to brush it away. Without hesitation, Ryan shrugged out of his long duster coat, now covered in ash from their desperate ride. "Here," he said, draping it around her shoulders. "This'll keep the embers off you." The coat was heavy and warm, smelling of horse and leather and the man himself. Despite its coating of ash, it offered protection that her city clothes could not provide. "But what about you?" Zara asked, noting his now exposed arms in his simple work shirt. Ryan's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile under different circumstances. "Born and raised in fire country, madam, skin's tougher than it looks." Even as he spoke, an ember landed on his forearm, but he merely brushed it away with barely a wince. Looking around, Zara could see about a dozen others who had fled the Valley Ranch hands, townspeople, and even a few children, all watching the advancing fire with expressions ranging from fear to grim resignation. "Will the town survive?" Zara asked quietly. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the inferno. "Hard to say, depends on which way the wind blows, but Rattlesnake Creek survived fire before." He turned his attention back to her. "Can you ride? We need to get to higher ground." Zara nodded, though the truth was she had only ridden placid horses in Boston parks, nothing like the powerful western mount that had carried them through the fire. "Good," Ryan said, helping her back onto his horse before swinging up behind her this time. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, his chest solid against her back. "We'll head to my ranch. It's got stone walls and a clearing all around it. Fire won't reach it." As they rode, the other refugees followed on foot or on the few horses available. The night had fully descended now, but no stars were visible through the thick smoke that blanketed the sky. The only light came from the hellish glow of the fire behind them, painting everything in shades of orange and red. "Have you lived here long?" Zara asked, trying to distract herself from the terror of their situation. "All my life," Ryan answered, his breath warm against her ear. "My father built the Cross T Ranch when this was still just a territory, been running it myself since he passed 5 years back." "I'm sorry about your father," Zara said sincerely. "He lived the life he wanted," Ryan replied, a note of pride in his voice. "Died the same way, that's all any of us can hope for." The path steepened, and Ryan urged his horse to greater effort. Zara could feel the animal's labored breathing beneath them, its coat slick with sweat despite the cool night air. "There it is," Ryan said finally, pointing to a structure looming ahead, a substantial ranch house built of stone and timber, surrounded by a corral and several outbuildings. True to his word, a cleared area encircled the entire homestead, providing a buffer against the approaching flames. As they rode into the yard, several men emerged from the bunkhouse, their faces registering surprise at the group of refugees. "Fire's taken the valley," Ryan called out to them. "Get water and blankets for these folks." His men moved immediately to follow his orders, and Zara was struck by the efficient way he commanded respect. As he helped her down from the horse, she stumbled, her ankle still painful from her earlier fall. "You're hurt," Ryan observed, his keen eyes missing nothing. "It's nothing," Zara insisted. "Just twisted my ankle when I fell." Without warning, Ryan swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the main house as if she weighed nothing. "Nothing or not, you need to stay off it," he said firmly. Too exhausted to protest, Zara allowed herself to be carried into the ranch house, where an older woman with gray-streaked hair was already preparing the main room for the refugees. "Mrs. Harker, this is Miss Reynolds," Ryan said as he carefully set Zara down on a worn but comfortable sofa. "She's meant to be the new schoolteacher, twisted her ankle getting away from the fire." "Lord have mercy," Mrs. Harker exclaimed, immediately kneeling to examine Zara's injury. "What a welcome you've had, child. Let me fetch you some clean water and bandages." As the housekeeper bustled away, Ryan crouched beside Zara, his face serious. "I need to help get the others settled and check on my livestock. Will you be all right here?" Zara nodded, suddenly acutely aware of how inappropriate it was to be alone with this man she'd just met, wearing his coat and sitting in his home. But the usual rules of propriety seemed distant and unimportant in the face of the disaster they'd just escaped. "Thank you again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Something flashed in Ryan's eyes, something warm that made Zara's heart beat a little faster despite her exhaustion. "Just happened to be in the right place," he said gruffly, rising to his feet. "Rest now, we'll sort everything else out in the morning." As he walked away, Zara found herself watching the straight line of his shoulders, the confident set of his stride. He was unlike any man she'd ever known in Boston, direct, unpolished, yet possessing a natural dignity that commanded respect. Mrs. Harker returned with water, bandages, and a clean dress that, while too large for Zara's slender frame, was blessedly free of smoke and ash. "This was my daughter's before she married and moved to California," the housekeeper explained. "It should serve until we can retrieve your things, if there's anything left to retrieve." The thought of her meager possessions, the books she'd brought to teach her future students, the few mementos of her parents, the carefully selected wardrobe that had represented such a significant investment potentially lost to the flames brought tears to Zara's eyes. "There now, Mrs. Harker said kindly, patting her hand. "Things can be replaced, lives cannot, and Mr. Thornton will make sure you have what you need, don't you worry." "I couldn't possibly impose," Zara began. "Nonsense," Mrs. Harker interrupted firmly. "That's not how we do things out here. In the West, we look after each other. It's the only way to survive." She helped Zara clean up and change, then wrapped her injured ankle with practiced hands. "Not broken, just a bad sprain. Stay off it for a few days and you'll be right as rain." Throughout the evening, more refugees arrived at the ranch, each with their own harrowing tale of escape. Ryan moved among them, offering reassurance, organizing sleeping arrangements, and ensuring everyone had food and water. Zara watched him from her place on the sofa, admiring the quiet authority with which he handled the crisis. As the night wore on, the glow from the fire remained visible through the windows, but reports from riders suggested that the town itself might be spared, protected by a change in wind direction and the natural barrier of the creek. Still, many outlying farms and ranches were lost, and the human toll remained unknown. It was well past midnight when Ryan finally returned to check on Zara, his face lined with fatigue but his eyes still alert. "You should be sleeping," he said, lowering himself onto a chair across from her. "I could say the same to you," she replied with a small smile. Ryan ran a hand through his ash-streaked hair. "I'll rest when I know everyone's safe." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "How's the ankle?" "Better," Zara assured him. "Mrs. Harker has been very kind." "She's been with my family since I was a boy," Ryan said. "Practically raised me after my mother passed." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. "You've lost both your parents." Ryan nodded, his expression unreadable. "What about you? What brings a Boston lady all the way out to our rough little corner of the territory?" Zara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this virtual stranger. Yet something about Ryan Thornton inspired trust. "After my parents died of influenza last winter, there wasn't much left for me in Boston. I saw an advertisement for a teacher in the Arizona territory and decided a fresh start was what I needed." "Bold move," Ryan commented, genuine admiration in his voice. "Most Eastern women would consider teaching out here a hardship post at best." "I'm not most Eastern women," Zara said with more spirit than she felt. "And I've always believed that education is important, perhaps even more so in places where it's less accessible." A smile, the first real one she'd seen from him, transformed Ryan's face, softening the hard lines and bringing a warmth to his eyes that made Zara's breath catch. "The children of Rattlesnake Creek will be lucky to have you, Miss Reynolds, assuming the schoolhouse is still standing." "And if it isn't?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, voicing the fear that had been growing since they'd fled the valley. "Then we'll rebuild it," Ryan said simply, as if the solution were obvious. "This territory was built by people who don't give up easily." The confidence in his voice was reassuring, and Zara found herself believing him despite the uncertainty of her situation. "Thank you," she said again, feeling as though the words were wholly inadequate for all he had done. Ryan stood, stretching his tall frame. "You need rest. I'll check on you in the morning." As he turned to leave, Zara called after him softly, "Your coat, I should return it." Ryan glanced back, his eyes lingering on her for a moment that seemed suspended in time. "Keep it," he said. "It suits you better than it ever suited me." With that, he was gone, leaving Zara alone with the ash-covered coat draped over the back of the sofa and a strange, unexpected warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire raging in the valley below. The following morning dawned hazy with smoke, but the immediate danger had passed. Zara awoke on the sofa where she'd finally fallen asleep to find the ranch house already bustling with activity. Through the window, she could see people gathering in the yard, some preparing to leave, others helping with chores as if to repay their host's hospitality. Mrs. Harker appeared with a tray of coffee and biscuits. "Good morning, dear. How's the ankle feeling today?" Zara carefully tested it, wincing slightly at the lingering pain but pleased to find it improved. "Better, thank you. Has there been any news of the town?" "Rattlesnake Creek still stands," the housekeeper reported cheerfully. "The fire burned itself out against the creek and the eastern hills. Mr. Thornton rode out at first light to assess the damage." Relief washed over Zara. At least her new home and workplace had survived, even if her personal belongings might be lost. "When he returns, he'll want to see you're eating properly," Mrs. Harker continued, setting the tray beside her. "That man doesn't miss a thing." "He's been very kind," Zara said, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks under the older woman's knowing gaze. "Ryan Thornton is the finest man in the territory," Mrs. Harker stated firmly. "Runs the biggest ranch for 50 miles and still finds time to help folks whenever there's need. Takes after his father that way." As Zara ate, Mrs. Harker shared stories of the Thornton family, how Ryan's father had claimed the land when it was still wild frontier, how he'd built the Cross T into a respectable operation despite raids, drought, and competition from larger cattle interests further south. And what of Mrs. Thornton? Zara found herself asking, then immediately felt foolish for her curiosity. Mrs. Harker's eyes twinkled knowingly. "There is no Mrs. Thornton, dear, not for lack of trying on the part of every eligible woman within riding distance, mind you. But Ryan's always been particular, says he's waiting for someone who loves the land as much as he does." Before Zara could formulate a response that wouldn't betray her inexplicable interest in Ryan's marital status, the sound of hoofbeats announced his return. Through the window, she watched him dismount with fluid grace, pausing to speak with some of the refugees before striding toward the house. He entered with the scent of smoke and morning air clinging to him, his face grave but composed. "Morning," he greeted Zara, removing his hat. "Ankle any better?" "Yes, thank you," she replied, suddenly very conscious of her borrowed dress and disheveled appearance. Ryan accepted a cup of coffee from Mrs. Harker before settling into a chair near Zara. "I've been to town," he reported. "Most of it's intact, though some outlying buildings were lost. The schoolhouse is standing, but it'll need some repairs before it's ready for lessons." "And my belongings?" Zara asked hesitantly, Ryan's expression softened with sympathy. "The stagecoach was destroyed, I'm afraid. But the driver made it to town safely with the other passengers, and he saved the mail pouch. If you had anything sent ahead to the post office, it should be there waiting." Zara nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Most of what she owned had been with her on the coach. "I'm just grateful everyone survived," she said with determined cheerfulness. "Things can be replaced." "That's the spirit," Ryan approved. "And speaking of replacing things, I've arranged for you to stay with the sheriff's widow, Mrs. Lawson, until you get settled. She has a spare room and has been hoping for company since her husband passed last winter." "That's very thoughtful," Zara said, touched by his consideration. "When will I be able to go to town?" "I'll take you myself once your ankle's stronger," Ryan promised. "Probably day after tomorrow, if that suits you." "That would be fine," Zara agreed, both grateful for and slightly disappointed by the delay. The truth was, despite her precarious situation, she found herself strangely comfortable at the Cross T Ranch, and the prospect of leaving produced an unexpected pang of regret. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Most of the refugees returned to their homes or to town, but Zara remained at the ranch, her mobility limited by her injury. She spent the time helping Mrs. Harker with indoor tasks, reading from Ryan's modest library, and learning about life on a cattle ranch. Ryan himself was often absent during daylight hours, overseeing the recovery efforts and checking on his far-flung herds. But he made a point of sitting with Zara each evening, their conversations growing longer and more personal as their initial reserve melted away. She learned that he had attended school back east for 2 years before his father's health called him home to take over the ranch. He spoke of his hopes for the territory's future, his belief in the importance of education, and his deep connection to the land that had been in his family for 2 generations. In turn, Zara shared stories of her life in Boston, her father's work as a doctor, her mother's involvement in the suffrage movement, and her own determination to make a meaningful contribution through teaching. She found in Ryan an unexpectedly attentive listener, someone who valued her thoughts and respected her independence in a way few men of her acquaintance ever had. By the morning of her departure for town, Zara's ankle had healed enough that she could walk with only a slight limp. Mrs. Harker had altered one of her daughter's dresses to fit Zara better, and Ryan had procured a few necessary items from town to replace some of what she'd lost. "Are you ready?" Ryan asked as he helped her onto his wagon, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Yes, thank you," Zara replied, suddenly shy in the face of their imminent parting. The thought of not seeing him each evening produced a hollowness in her chest that she wasn't prepared to examine too closely. The ride to Rattlesnake Creek took them through the valley where the fire had raged just days before. The landscape was transformed blackened earth and skeletal trees stretched as far as the eye could see, yet already green shoots were pushing through the ash, nature's resilience on display. "It will recover," Ryan said, noting her somber gaze. "Fire's part of the natural cycle out here, clears away the old, makes room for new growth." "It's hard to imagine now," Zara admitted. "Come spring, these hills will be greener than you've ever seen them," Ryan promised. "The wildflowers that come after a fire are something to behold." As they crested a hill, the town of Rattlesnake Creek came into view, a collection of wooden buildings straddling the creek that gave the settlement its name. It was smaller than Zara had imagined, but neat and purposeful, with a main street lined with businesses and side streets where homes nestled beneath cottonwood trees. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. Ryan smiled, pleased by her reaction. "It's not Boston, but we're proud of it." "There's the schoolhouse," he added, pointing to a whitewashed building set slightly apart from the others. "It needs a new roof and some window repairs, but it should be ready within a week." As they drove down the main street, people stopped to stare and wave. Ryan acknowledged them with nods and occasional greetings, but Zara sensed a certain reserve in his manner that hadn't been present at the ranch. "Everyone's curious about you," he explained, noting her questioning look. News travels fast in a small town, and the new schoolteacher arriving in the middle of a wildfire is the most excitement we've had in months. They stopped in front of a neat clapboard house with a small front garden. A plump, gray-haired woman emerged before Ryan could even help Zara down from the wagon. "Mr. Thornton, and this must be our new teacher," the woman exclaimed, hurrying forward with her hands outstretched. "I'm Eugenia Lawson. Welcome to Rattlesnake Creek, Miss Reynolds." "Thank you for opening your home to me, Mrs. Lawson," Zara said, accepting the woman's warm handclasp. "It's my pleasure, dear. It's been too quiet since Harold passed." She turned to Ryan with a knowing smile. "And thank you for bringing her safely, Mr. Thornton. Will you stay for lunch?" Ryan shook his head, his expression unreadable. "Much obliged, madam, but I need to get back to the ranch. Cattle won't feed themselves." As he helped unload Zara's few belongings, she found herself searching for words that would adequately express her gratitude without revealing the confusing tangle of other emotions she was experiencing. "Mr. Thornton, Ryan," she began hesitantly when they stood alone beside the wagon. "I don't know how to thank you properly for everything you've done." Ryan's blue eyes held her steadily. "No thanks needed, Miss Reynolds. Anyone would have done the same." "I don't believe that's true," Zara said softly, "and I wish. That is, I hope I'll see you again." Something flickered in Ryan's expression, a momentary softening that made Zara's heart race. "I'm on the school board," he said with the ghost of a smile, "so you'll certainly see me at meetings, and perhaps Perhaps you might like to visit the ranch again once you're settled. Mrs. Harker would enjoy the company. I'd like that very much, Zara replied, a warm glow spreading through her at the invitation. Ryan nodded, his usual reserve returning as he became aware of the curious glances from passers-by. Take care of yourself, Miss Reynolds, and welcome to Rattlesnake Creek. With that, he climbed back onto the wagon and departed, leaving Zara standing on the threshold of her new life, clutching his ash-covered coat which she had stubbornly refused to return and watching until his figure disappeared down the dusty main street. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Zara settled into her role as Rattlesnake Creek schoolteacher. The schoolhouse repairs were completed as promised, and classes began with 15 pupils ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. The challenges were numerous limited supplies, varying levels of previous education, and the occasional resistance from parents who questioned the value of schooling beyond basic literacy. But Zara approached each day with determination and enthusiasm. Mrs. Lawson proved to be a delightful companion and an invaluable source of information about the town and its inhabitants. Through her, Zara learned more about Ryan Thornton's standing in the community, his fairness as an employer, his generosity during hard times, and his quiet leadership in matters affecting the territory's development. That young man has turned down offers to run for territorial representative twice now, Mrs. Lawson told her one evening as they sat on the porch after supper. Says he's needed at the ranch, but I think it's more than that. Ryan believes in building community from the ground up, not imposing rules from above. He's not what I expected when I first saw him, Zara admitted. Mrs. Lawson's shrewd eyes twinkled. And what did you expect, dear? Zara felt her cheeks warm. I suppose I thought all Western ranchers would be rough, uncultured. And instead you found a gentleman who can quote Shakespeare while branding a calf, Mrs. Lawson finished with a chuckle. Ryan's mother was a schoolteacher too, you know, before she married his father. She made sure her son had education alongside his ranch skills. This new piece of information added another dimension to Zara's understanding of the complex man who had rescued her from the fire. It explained his respect for her profession and his commitment to the school, but it also suggested a depth of feeling behind his support that she hadn't considered. As promised, she saw Ryan at school board meetings, where his practical suggestions and unwavering support for her more progressive teaching methods won her gratitude. But these encounters were public and necessarily formal, giving them little opportunity for the kind of private conversations they had enjoyed at the ranch. It wasn't until nearly a month after her arrival that Ryan appeared at Mrs. Lawson's door on a Saturday afternoon, hat in hand and his buckskin horse tethered to the hitching post. Miss Reynolds, he greeted her, a hint of uncertainty in his usually confident demeanor. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Zara assured him, acutely aware of Mrs. Lawson's interested presence just inside the doorway. It's good to see you, Mr. Thornton. I was wondering, Ryan continued, if you might like to ride out to the ranch tomorrow. Mrs. Harker has been asking after you and… He hesitated, then added more softly, I thought you might like to see how the valley's recovering from the fire. Joy surged through Zara at the invitation. I would love to, she said without hesitation. If Mrs. Lawson doesn't mind, why would I mind, Mrs. Lawson exclaimed from behind her. A day in the fresh air will do you good, dear. You've been working too hard with those children. Ryan's relieved smile warmed Zara to her core. I'll come for you after church then, he said. About 1 o'clock, I'll be ready, Zara promised. The following day dawned clear and crisp, the autumn air carrying the scent of pine and sage. Zara dressed with particular care in her best riding skirt, one of the few items she'd been able to purchase since arriving, and a simple shirtwaist that Mrs. Lawson assured her was most becoming with her dark hair and blue eyes. True to his word, Ryan arrived promptly at 1, this time mounted on his horse with a second, gentler mount in tow. This is Daisy, he said as he helped Zara into the saddle. She's steady as they come. The ride to the Cross T was leisurely, allowing Zara to appreciate the landscape in a way she hadn't been able to during her fiery introduction to the territory. As Ryan had predicted, new growth was already reclaiming the burned areas, tender green shoots pushing through the blackened earth like symbols of hope. "It's amazing how quickly nature recovers," Zara observed as they rode side by side. Ryan nodded, his face thoughtful. "That's what I love about this land. Its resilience. No matter what happens, fire, drought, blizzard, it endures and renews itself. Like the people who live here," Zara suggested. Ryan's gaze met hers, something warm and appreciative in his blue eyes. "Exactly like that, yes. At the ranch, Mrs. Harker greeted Zara with a motherly embrace and immediately insisted on feeding them both. They spent a pleasant afternoon touring the ranch buildings, with Ryan proudly showing Zara the improvements he'd made since taking over from his father: the expanded barn, the new windmill, the orchard he'd planted that was just beginning to bear fruit. "Your father would be proud," Zara said sincerely as they walked among the young apple trees. Ryan's expression softened. "I hope so. Everything I've done has been building on what he started." "And what will you build next?" Zara asked, genuinely curious about his vision for the future. Ryan was quiet for a moment, his gaze sweeping across his land. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately," he finally said. "For years, it was enough just to maintain what my father built, to keep the ranch running through good seasons and bad. But lately—" He hesitated, then turned to face her directly. "Lately, I've been thinking there should be more to life than just work and duty." The intensity in his eyes made Zara's breath catch. "What more are you looking for?" Ryan took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the slight cleft in his chin partially hidden by his neatly trimmed beard. "I think I'm starting to figure that out," he said softly. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility, until Mrs. Harker's voice calling them to supper broke the spell. Ryan stepped back, a hint of color rising to his tanned cheeks, and offered Zara his arm to escort her back to the house. Supper was a lively affair, with Mrs. Harker insisting on hearing all about Zara's experiences teaching the town's children. Ryan listened attentively, occasionally offering insights about particular families or suggesting resources that might be available for the school. All too soon, it was time to return to town before darkness fell. As they rode back, the setting sun painted the landscape in gold and crimson, the beauty of it nearly taking Zara's breath away. "I never imagined it would be like this," she confessed. "When I decided to come west, I pictured something harsher, more forbidding." "It can be both," Ryan said. "Beautiful and harsh, welcoming and dangerous. That's why it gets under your skin. Makes you love it despite, or maybe because of, its contradictions." Zara glanced at him, struck by how his words might apply equally to the man himself. Ryan Thornton was indeed a study in contradictions, a hard-working rancher with the soul of a poet, a man of few words whose eyes spoke volumes, a leader who preferred to serve his community quietly rather than seek recognition. As they approached town, Zara found herself wishing the day could stretch on indefinitely. Something had shifted between them during their time together, a deepening of connection, an acknowledgement of possibilities that neither had openly expressed. Ryan slowed their pace as they neared Mrs. Lawson's house, clearly as reluctant as Zara for their time together to end. "Would you like to come to dinner at the ranch next Sunday?" he asked suddenly. "Mrs. Harker is already planning the menu." Zara smiled, warmed by the thought that they had been discussing her return before it was even proposed. "I'd like that very much." Ryan's answering smile transformed his normally serious face. "Good, that's good." They arrived at Mrs. Lawson's to find the widow waiting on the porch, a knowing smile on her face as Ryan helped Zara dismount with hands that lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for a wonderful day," Zara said softly. Ryan held her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "Until next Sunday, then." "Until Sunday," she echoed, reluctantly stepping back. As he rode away, Mrs. Lawson came to stand beside Zara. "That man hasn't stopped thinking about you since the day of the fire," she observed casually. "Mrs. Lawson," Zara exclaimed, feeling her cheeks flush. "Oh, don't Mrs. Lawson me," the older woman chuckled. "I've known Ryan Thornton since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, and I've never seen him look at any woman the way he looks at you." The words sent a thrill of pleasure through Zara, even as she tried to maintain a proper demeanor. "We're just friends. He's been kind to me since I arrived." Was Mrs. Lawson's only response, but her smile spoke volumes. The Sunday dinners at the Cross T Ranch became a cherished ritual over the following weeks. Sometimes Ryan would ride into town to escort Zara. Other times, when his ranch duties demanded his attention, he would send one of his hands with a horse for her. Always, the time they spent together deepened their connection and understanding of each other. As autumn progressed toward winter, Ryan began appearing in town more frequently, often timing his visits to coincide with the end of the school day so he could walk Zara home. The townspeople took note, and soon their developing relationship was the subject of gentle gossip and speculation. "You've done what a dozen local girls couldn't manage in years of trying," teased Sarah Miller, the mercantile owner's wife, as Zara selected fabric for new curtains for the schoolhouse. "You've caught Ryan Thornton's eye." "It's not like that," Zara protested, though her heart quickened at the thought. Sarah's knowing smile matched Mrs. Lawson's. "If you say so, dear, but a man doesn't ride 10 miles into town 3 times a week just to discuss school board business." The truth was, Zara had been fighting a growing attachment to Ryan since the day he'd rescued her from the fire. His quiet strength, his integrity, his thoughtful nature all combined with his undeniable physical appeal to create an attraction more powerful than any she'd experienced in Boston's careful society. Yet she hesitated to acknowledge these feelings, even to herself. Her purpose in coming west had been independence, a chance to build a life on her own terms. Becoming attached to Ryan, no matter how admirable a man he might be, hadn't been part of her plan. The decision was forced into the open on a crisp December afternoon when Ryan invited Zara to ride out to a special place he wanted to show her. They followed a winding trail up into the foothills, eventually reaching a sheltered meadow overlooking the valley. Despite the season, wild grasses still swayed in the breeze, and a small stream gurgled cheerfully over rocks worn smooth by time. "This is beautiful," Zara breathed, taking in the panoramic view. "It was my mother's favorite spot," Ryan said, helping her dismount. "My father brought her here when they were courting. Later, they'd ride up here together whenever they needed peace or privacy away from ranch demands." The significance of him sharing this place with her wasn't lost on Zara. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said softly. Ryan led her to a flat boulder overlooking the valley and helped her seat herself before joining her, their shoulders nearly touching. For a long moment, they sat in companionable silence, watching an eagle soar on thermal currents above the valley floor. "Zara," Ryan finally said, her name sounding different somehow in his deep voice. "I've never been a man of many words, but there are things I need to say to you." Her heart raced as she turned to face him. "Yes," Ryan's eyes, blue as the winter sky above them, held her steadily. "When I rode into that fire 3 months ago, I was just doing what needed to be done, helping someone in danger. I never expected." He paused, searching for words. "I never expected that saving you would end up saving something in me too." "What do you mean?" Zara asked, barely above a whisper. "For years after my father died, I've just been existing," Ryan admitted. "Working the ranch, doing my duty to the land and the community, but not really living. Not until you came." His hand found hers, strong fingers intertwining with her more delicate ones. "You brought something back to life in me, Zara, something I thought was gone for good." Emotion welled up in Zara's throat, making speech difficult. "Ryan, let me finish," he said gently. "I know you came west to be independent, to build your own life. The last thing I want is to interfere with that, but I also know that what's growing between us is rare and precious, and I'd be a fool not to acknowledge it." Zara's free hand rose to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I feel it too," she confessed. "I've tried not to because I was afraid of losing myself, of becoming dependent on someone else after working so hard for my independence. But with you, it doesn't feel like losing myself. It feels like finding something I never knew I was missing." Relief and joy transformed Ryan's expression. "That's how it should be between two people who are truly partners," he said. "Neither one diminished by the other, but both made stronger together." The wisdom in his words struck Zara profoundly. This was not the possessive attitude she'd feared from men in the past, but something far rarer, a genuine respect for her as an equal, an acknowledgement of her strength and independence even as he offered his heart. I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment you draped your ash-covered coat around my shoulders, Zara admitted, the words finally free after weeks of containment. Ryan's smile was radiant as he leaned closer. And I think I've been falling in love with you since I saw you crawling toward that journal in the middle of a wildfire, refusing to let go of what mattered to you even in the face of danger. His hand rose to cup her cheek, and Zara leaned into his touch, all hesitation forgotten. When his lips finally met hers, the kiss was gentle yet sure, a perfect reflection of the man himself. Zara's arms wound around his neck as she returned the kiss with all the emotion that had been building in her heart. When they finally parted, Ryan rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her face. I love you, Zara Reynolds, he said simply, and I want to build a future with you if that's what you want too. It is, Zara whispered, surprised at how certain she felt. I love you too, Ryan. More than I thought possible. They remained in the meadow until the winter sun began to dip toward the horizon, talking of their hopes and dreams, their fears and doubts, their visions for a shared future. By the time they rode back down toward the valley, the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue of the eastern sky. News of their courtship, now official, rather than merely speculated upon, spread quickly through Rattlesnake Creek. The community's approval was evident in the smiles that greeted them when they attended church together, in the knowing nods of the older women, and in the good-natured teasing Ryan received from his fellow ranchers. Winter settled over the territory, bringing snow to the higher elevations and crisp, clear days to the valley. The schoolhouse was warm and cozy thanks to improvements Ryan had quietly arranged, and Zara's students thrived under her dedicated teaching. Weekdays were devoted to her pupils, but weekends increasingly found her at the Cross T Ranch, learning about cattle operations from Ryan, cooking with Mrs. Harker, and gradually becoming part of the life there. Christmas approached, bringing with it preparations for the town's annual celebration. The schoolchildren practiced carols and recitations, and Zara threw herself into creating a memorable program for their parents and the community. Ryan supported her efforts, using his connections to obtain small gifts for each child and helping construct a makeshift stage in the town hall. On Christmas Eve, after the successful school program, Ryan escorted Zara back to Mrs. Lawson's house through gently falling snow. The town was peaceful, windows glowing with lamplight and wreaths adorning nearly every door. It was a wonderful program, Ryan said, his breath visible in the cold air. You've done amazing things with those children in just a few months. They're eager to learn, Zara replied, warmed by his praise, and having proper supplies makes such a difference. She squeezed his arm gratefully, knowing that many of those supplies had appeared mysteriously after he'd made a trip to the territorial capital. They reached Mrs. Lawson's porch, but instead of saying goodnight as usual, Ryan reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with red ribbon. I wanted to give you this tonight, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Privately. Zara accepted the gift with trembling fingers. Should I open it now? Ryan nodded, watching her intently as she carefully untied the ribbon and unwrapped the paper. Inside was a small leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with an intricate design of wildflowers. To replace the one you lost in the fire, Ryan explained. I had it made special by a leatherworker in Prescott. Tears sprang to Zara's eyes as she ran her fingers over the beautiful craftsmanship. Ryan, it's perfect, thank you. Open it, he urged softly. Zara did as he asked, and gasped when she saw what was tucked inside the front cover, a simple gold ring with a small but perfect diamond that caught the lamplight from Mrs. Lawson's window. I know it's only been 3 months, Ryan said, taking her free hand in his. And if you think it's too soon, I'll understand. But I love you, Zara Reynolds, and I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me? Joy surged through Zara, bright and overwhelming. All her former concerns about independence seemed distant and insignificant compared to the love she felt for this man and the future they could build together. Yes, she whispered, and then more strongly, yes, I will marry you, Ryan Thornton. Ryan's face lit with happiness as he took the ring from the journal and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand alone. Then he gathered her into his arms, his kiss a promise of all the years to come. When they finally parted, breathless and glowing with happiness, Ryan looked down at her with such tenderness that Zara felt her heart might overflow. "When I rode into that fire to find you, I never imagined I was riding toward my future," he said softly, "but that's exactly what happened. The fire that threatened to destroy everything ended up giving us each other," Zara agreed. "Like you said about the valley clearing away the old to make room for new growth." Ryan smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Spring will be here before we know it. The wildflowers will bloom in the burn area, more beautiful than ever. I'd like to marry you then, if you're willing, under the open sky surrounded by new life." "That sounds perfect," Zara said, her heart full to bursting. "A new beginning." As they sealed their agreement with another kiss, snowflakes continued to fall gently around them, covering the world in pristine white nature's promise that after every ending comes renewal, after every fire comes rebirth, and after every loss can come the greatest of all gains: love. Spring came early that year, just as Ryan had predicted. By mid-March, the hills that had been blackened by fire 6 months earlier were carpeted with wildflowers, brilliant blue lupines, golden poppies, and delicate purple asters, creating a tapestry of color across the landscape. Zara and Ryan were married on the first day of April, in the same meadow where he had proposed. The entire town turned out for the celebration, making the journey up into the foothills to witness the union of their schoolteacher and the territory's most respected rancher. Under an arch woven with wildflowers and greenery, with the valley spread out below them like a promise of possibilities, they exchanged vows written from their hearts. "When I rode into that fire last September," Ryan said, his voice carrying clearly to all assembled, "I was just doing what needed to be done. I had no idea I was riding toward the greatest blessing of my life. You have brought light and purpose back into my world, Zara. I promise to cherish and respect you, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to face whatever fires life brings us together for all of our days." Tears glistened in Zara's eyes as she responded. "When I came west, I was searching for independence, for a place to build a meaningful life. What I found in the midst of fire and ash was you, a man whose strength lies in his gentleness, whose leadership is shown through service, and whose love has made me stronger rather than diminishing me. I promise to stand by your side through all seasons, to build our future together, and to love you with all that I am for as long as we both shall live." The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with tables set up in the ranch yard, lanterns hanging from trees, and music provided by local fiddlers. As darkness fell, Ryan led Zara away from the festivities to a quiet corner of the garden his mother had planted years before. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "More than I ever imagined possible," Zara replied, resting her head against his chest. "And you, complete," Ryan said simply, the word containing worlds of meaning. Together they looked up at the stars scattered like diamonds across the vast western sky, their future stretching before them as boundless as the territory itself. From the ashes of that September fire had risen something beautiful and enduring, a love as resilient as the land that had brought them together. A partnership that would weather whatever storms might come, and a story that would be told in Rattlesnake Creek for generations to come, how the fire spread through the valley, and the cowboy shielded her with his own coat of ash. How they found in each other the very things they hadn't known they were seeking. How, sometimes, what looks like destruction is merely the beginning of the most beautiful renewal of all.